Remember the episode Zuko Alone, where Zuko trains a young Earth Kingdom boy named Lee? He teaches him how to sword fight, and Zuko emphasizes the importance of using both blades as one whole instead of favoring one blade over the other. Keep in mind, these are dual swords, two halves of a single weapon. Don't think of them as separate, because they're not. They're two different parts of the same whole. At face value, that's just a really cool moment showing a softer side to Zuko, who's normally really angsty and angry and hurt. But in addition to showing a softer side to Zuko, it also serves as a metaphor for the two halves of Zuko's identity. The first half of Zuko's identity, or the first blade, is the desire to acquire and wield power, which he inherited from his father, Fire Lord Ozai. Ozai is one of the most powerful firebenders in the world, and he commands immense political authority. Zuko, being his son, sees that. He sees that power, he really admires it, and he desires to possess and wield that same power. Now, that might sound bad, but it's not inherently negative. It's good for Zuko to cultivate strength and skill. See, what makes power good or bad is how one uses it. A good ruler acquires and wields power to govern well. They use their power to secure and defend their citizens' natural rights. They establish helpful laws, they protect their people, they bring order to chaos, and create a society where their people can flourish. The problem is, Ozai doesn't use his power to empower others, but to enslave them. He uses power for his own self-serving ends instead of serving others, and Zuko copies that. Like his dad, he wants to use power to get what he wants instead of help others get what they want. The second half of Zuko's identity comes from his mother, Ursa. She teaches him compassion, the awareness of another's distress, and a desire to alleviate it. It's the second blade, so to speak. It acts as a counterbalance to the self-serving nature Zuko inherited from his father, and it motivates Zuko to use his power to relieve suffering when necessary. For those who have watched the show, you know that throughout the first part of the series, Zuko doesn't act like his mother at all. He doesn't really act with a ton of compassion. He primarily acts like his father and suppresses the compassion his mother taught him. The truth is, he needs to be more compassionate, but not at the expense of his drive for power. If the two sides of Zuko are like dual swords, then acting only like his father or only like his mother makes him weaker. He can't be fully compassionate and he can't be fully power hungry. See, neither power nor compassion must be relegated. They must be integrated together. And once integrated, Zuko transforms from petty tyrant to noble leader. The episode opens with our fugitive firebender arriving in a small Earth Kingdom town. It's under the control of corrupt soldiers led by a man named Gow. In the town, Zuko meets a young boy named Lee and his parents, Gonzu and Sela. And Lee and Gonzu and Sela, they all invite him to rest and help out on their farm while their oldest son, Sensu, is away at war. And just pause for a moment. Note that name, Sensu. It's a combination of Gonzu and Sela. It's a combination of his parents' names. And therefore, it's an expression of the theme, two parts becoming one whole. It reinforces, in a really literal way, the fact that both parents contribute to their son's identity. Just like Ozai and Ursa's traits both make up Zuko's identity. And it's perhaps because of this reminder that Zuko wrestles with the two parts of his own identity while staying on the farm. In flashbacks, he recalls the conflicting lessons his family taught him. Speaking of his family, let's just break down the family tree. So you have Ozai and Ursa, which, as you know, they're the parents of Zuko. They're also the parents of Zuko's sister, Azula. Now, Ozai, he has a brother named Iroh, and Iroh's older. And he's next in line for the throne after their father, Fire Lord Azula, passes away. So it goes Fire Lord Azula, the next in line is Iroh, and then next in line after him is Iroh's son, Lu Ten. And you can probably put it together, but Lu Ten is the nephew of Ozai, and he's the cousin of Zuko and Azula. I broke that down for you because in a minute you'll see that Ozai and Azula are kind of constantly scheming against Azula, Iroh, and Lu Ten. They have these fantasies about taking power for themselves because they are so power hungry. Okay, so in Zuko's first flashback, he remembers Azula's plan to acquire more power. She wants Ozai's older brother, remember, their uncle Iroh, to die in the war so Ozai can ascend the throne as Fire Lord. So her and her father are kind of on the same wavelength. And Zuko's shocked by this. He asks, how would you feel if Lu Ten, remember their cousin, if Lu Ten wanted our dad to die? You see, Zuko wants Azula to consider how she would feel if the roles were reversed. What if Lu Ten plotted their father's death? She should think about the kind of pain that would cause her. But she responds with a quip about Ozai being a better Fire Lord than Iroh. She really doesn't care. Her refusal to consider Zuko's question suggests she can't or won't consider pain, either her own or other people's. And because she can't consider pain, she can't feel compassion. Because of her lack of compassion, Azula doesn't just fantasize about her uncle's death, but about wiping out entire armies to gain more power. Later on in the episode, Azula states Uncle Iroh should fight to the last man to win the Earth Kingdom city of Ba Sing Se. That's a huge cost, but because she can't imagine the suffering of others, she can't conceive of that human toll. She's willing to expend the life of every soldier, not for the sake of honor or for duty, but for the sake of winning, for the sake of asserting her power over another. Such a careless view of life comes from her father Ozai, who also demonstrates a severe lack of compassion. We see this in another flashback from Zuko. When Zuko's family learns that Iroh's son Lu Ten, their cousin, died in the war, Ozai doesn't use his power to comfort his brother. Instead, Ozai uses his nephew's death as an opportunity to seize more power. Remember, once Ozai and Iroh's dad Azula dies, then Iroh's next in line because he's the oldest. Ozai approaches their father, the reigning Fire Lord Azula, to usurp Iroh's right to rule. Side note, before jumping into the main point, Ozai flatters his father Azula by saying he and Ursa named Azula after him. This is a fascinating revelation about Azula's identity. Remember in the beginning, Sensu? His name expresses that both parents created his identity, and therefore he possesses both their traits. Yet the name Azula isn't a combination of two names. It's a variation of one. In other words, it's not a combination of Ursa and Ozai. It's just a variation of Azula, which comes from her father's side. This suggests she doesn't have her mother's trait of compassion and only possesses a drive for power from her father's side of the family. Okay, back to the main point. Despite Ozai's flattery, Ozai's request to replace Iroh infuriates Azula. As punishment, Azula demands that Ozai endure the same pain as Iroh. This implies Ozai must kill Zuko. Yet off-screen, Ursa offers herself up in Zuko's stead and saves him. The point is, Ozai and Azula's paradigm is as simple as it is brutal. Wield power to gain more power, and eliminate whoever stands in the way to get it, even family. They impress this uncompassionate, all-consuming lust for power on Zuko. And without Ursa to cultivate his compassion, Zuko suppresses his mother's trait and elevates Ozai and Azula's. Although Ursa is forced out of the picture, her lessons and examples still influence the conflicted prince. Zuko remembers another flashback where she taught him about compassion. As they're feeding turtle ducks, Zuko takes the loaf of bread and hurls it at the duckling, saying, "Hey mom, want to see how Azula feeds turtle ducks?" From this line, we can gather that at one point Zuko had watched Azula chuck a loaf at the animals. Zuko copies Azula because he wants to see if Ursa is okay with him using his power to abuse the animal. But the thing is, Ursa doesn't approve, and she reprimands him. She wants Zuko to be mindful of the suffering he inflicts when he abuses his power. Oddly enough, though, in the same moment she condemns Zuko's violence, she also commends the mother turtle duck for biting Zuko. Teasing her son, she says, "That's what moms are like. If you mess with their babies, they're going to bite you back." Ursa believes it's okay to have power, but it should be used to defend others and not harm them. That's why she supports the mother turtle duck. She used her power to forcefully defend her offspring against Zuko. Ursa's character and views are like that of a protective mother bear, which isn't surprising given she's named after the two bear-shaped constellations in the night sky, Ursa Major and Ursa Minor. Even though Ursa is ripped out of Zuko's life and Zuko suppresses his compassion as he grows older, Lee's family, the Earth Kingdom family, reawakens it. Remember Gow? When he taunts the family with news of Sensu's capture, Zuko can't help but feel compassion for Lee's family. He sees himself in the young boy Lee. Lee lost an older brother to the war, and Zuko lost an older cousin. He can't help but desire to alleviate the family's suffering because he knows how excruciating it is to lose a loved one to war. Rediscovering his compassion gives Zuko a new purpose for wielding power. Instead of using it for his own interests, like Ozai and Azula taught him, he uses it for the interests of others, aka to confront Gow and ultimately alleviate the suffering of Lee's family and the rest of the villagers. When Zuko and Gow face off, Zuko quickly dispatches Gow's underlings without his firebending. Zuko hides that part of himself because he doesn't want the Earth Kingdom villagers to turn on him. But hiding his firebending, in other words not wielding his power, weakens him. As a result, Gow is able to win a temporary victory by knocking Zuko down. Yet as Zuko is lying on his back, he remembers the last words Ursa spoke to him before Ozai took her away. She says, "No matter how much things seem to change, never forget who you are." That line might seem really confusing at first. How does remembering his identity help him in this fight? Ursa's telling Zuko to not hide any part of his identity like he's accustomed to doing. In the past, he's suppressed his compassion so he could wield his full power without feeling bad for those he hurt. But now in the fight with Gow, he's suppressing his full power by not using his firebending. Both approaches are wrong because in both instances, he's suppressing one part or the other. It's like he's only operating with one sword. The memory reminds him he shouldn't suppress either half of his identity. He should embrace both parts. Ursa's words remind him it's okay to wield his full power like Ozai taught him because it's motivated by compassion. Zuko's using his power to defend Lee, to defend the villagers, to defend the weak, just like Ursa taught him. Once Zuko realizes he has a good reason for using his firebending, he wields his full power and easily dispatches Gow. When Gow asks who he is, Zuko declares, "My name is Zuko, son of Ursa and Fire Lord Ozai, Prince of the Fire Nation and heir to the throne." That line reveals a shift in Zuko's psyche. Previously, when declaring his identity, he would only describe himself in relation to his father or the throne. Now he's referencing his mother as well. Proudly naming both parents indicates he's no longer suppressing one part of his identity for the other. He finally sees himself as a product of both. In other words, he's finally using both swords. He's finally united both parts of his identity. Power without compassion makes Zuko a tyrant, but compassion without power renders him incapable of defending the downtrodden. By blending both, Zuko is able to stand between the enemy and the innocent. Compassion allows him to take pity on the oppressed, while his power allows him to defeat their oppressors. Ultimately, combining compassion and power allows Zuko to give everyone what they deserve. He gives the innocent their dignity and the wicked their punishment. In other words, he gives them justice. And practicing justice is so important for Zuko's formation as a leader. Goodness and justice cannot be separated. A good ruler is a just ruler. By integrating the two parts of himself, practicing justice and fighting Gow the warlord, Zuko is preparing to be a great Fire Lord.